Single dad garbage man saved a woman from attackers, but her next words made him run away. He risked his life to protect her, but when she whispered what no one expected, he dropped everything and vanished like he'd seen a ghost. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun crept higher in the sky, but Tom Rourke barely noticed. His mind kept replaying the woman's whispered words over and over, like a broken record. He sat on the curb near his garbage truck, his hands trembling slightly as he accepted a paper cup of coffee from one of the paramedics. "Sir, we need to take your statement," a young police officer said, notepad in hand. Tom nodded mechanically, his thoughts scattered like autumn leaves in a storm. "I was just doing my route," he managed, his voice rougher than usual. Heard screaming from behind the store. Two guys had her cornered. He paused, taking a sip of the bitter coffee to steady himself. One had a knife. I just reacted." The officer jotted down notes while Tom described the attackers, but his eyes kept drifting to the ambulance where they were treating the woman. Her final words before they'd loaded her in haunted him. 11 years ago. The timing lined up perfectly with his darkest days, right before he'd hit rock bottom and finally sought help. "That was brave of you, Mr. Rourke," the officer said, closing his notepad. "Not many people would have stepped in like that." Tom shrugged, crushing the empty coffee cup in his weathered hands. Anyone would have done the same, but even as he said it, he knew that wasn't true. The old Tom, the one who'd crawled inside a bottle and stayed there for years, wouldn't have helped anyone. A paramedic approached, her orange vest bright in the morning light. "The victim would like to speak with you, if you're willing." Tom's heart hammered against his ribs. He stood slowly, his work boots suddenly feeling like they were filled with concrete. Each step toward the ambulance felt heavier than the last. The woman sat on the edge of the ambulance's back bumper, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. A butterfly bandage covered a cut above her right eyebrow, and bruises were beginning to darken on her cheeks. But her eyes, a striking shade of green, were clear and focused entirely on him. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm Eva." Tom nodded, keeping a respectful distance. Tom Rourke. Eva's fingers tightened on the blanket. "What you did? Stepping in like that." She took a shaky breath. Not many people would have risked themselves for a stranger. "It was nothing," Tom mumbled, studying the ground. "It wasn't nothing." Eva's voice grew stronger. "Those men, they would have." She stopped, collecting herself. "You saved my life, Mr. Rourke." Tom finally met her gaze, and that same jolt of recognition passed between them. She looked to be in her early 40s, with auburn hair streaked, with gray at the temples. There was something familiar about the shape of her nose, the set of her jaw. "What you said earlier?" Tom began hesitantly. "About 11 years ago." Eva nodded slowly. "I knew it the moment I saw you. You look exactly like him." She paused, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Like Noah's father." The name hit Tom like a physical blow. Noah. He'd known a Noah once, very briefly. A woman he'd met in a bar during one of his lowest points, when he was drowning his PTSD in whatever alcohol he could afford. They'd spent a weekend together, and then he'd left, just like he'd left everything else back then. "I'm not," Tom started, but the words died in his throat. Because he might be. The timing fit. The resemblance she'd mentioned, the crushing weight of guilt that had been his constant companion for so many years, suddenly felt heavier. "Noah's 10, Eva said quietly. "He has your eyes, and your smile, when he actually shows it, which isn't often these days." Tom sank down onto the bumper beside her, maintaining a careful distance. His hands were shaking again, but not from the morning cold. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The man you met 11 years ago, I'm not him anymore. I was lost back then. Drinking, running from everything." Eva's expression softened slightly. "And now I'm sober. Have been for almost 9 years." He thought of Gracie, waiting at the neighbor's house. "I have a daughter. She's 10 too. She saved my life, really. Made me want to be better." Eva absorbed this information silently. After a long moment, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled up a photo and handed it to Tom. A boy with serious eyes stared back at him from the screen. Dark hair, like Tom's had been before it went gray. A straight nose that Tom recognized from his own childhood photos. But it was the set of the jaw, the slight furrow between the eyebrows, that made his breath catch. He saw that same expression in the mirror every morning. "He's been asking about you?" Eva said softly. "More and more lately. I never knew how to find you, never even knew your last name." Tom handed the phone back, his movements careful and deliberate as he tried to control the tremor in his hands. I'm not the same man who left you, but I'm not sure I deserve to be in his life either." "Maybe that's not our decision to make," Eva said. "Noah deserves to know where he comes from, and from what I've seen today, the man you are now is someone worth knowing." The wail of another siren in the distance made them both jump. The paramedic who had been giving them space approached. "Miss Mitchell, we really should get you to the hospital for a proper checkup." Eva nodded, then turned back to Tom. She pulled a business card from her purse and pressed it into his hand. "This is my number. Take some time to think about it. But please, don't disappear again." Tom stared at the card as Eva was helped into the ambulance. His garbage route would need to be finished. Gracie would need to be picked up. Life would go on as normal, except nothing felt normal anymore. He had a son who had his eyes and rarely smiled. He carefully tucked the card into his wallet next to the worn photo of Gracie he always carried. Then he walked back to his truck, his steps heavy with the weight of possibilities and responsibilities he'd never known he had. Tom's truck rumbled down Maple Street as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement. His hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, his knuckles white with tension. The woman's whispered words from that morning haunted him, making his chest tight with a familiar ache he'd spent years trying to forget. Pulling into his driveway, Tom noticed Mrs. Lavelle watering her prized rose bushes next door. Gracie was helping her, carefully, holding the watering can with both hands. The sight of his daughter usually brought immediate comfort, but today even that couldn't ease the storm in his mind. "Daddy!" Gracie called out, abandoning her gardening duties to run toward him. Her brown pigtails bounced with each step, and despite everything, Tom managed a small smile. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, wrapping her in a hug. "Did you have a good day?" "Uh-huh. Mrs. Lavelle taught me about deadheading roses. It sounds scary, but it just means cutting off the old flowers." Mrs. Lavelle approached them, wiping her soil-covered hands on her apron. One look at Tom's face, and her usual playful expression turned serious. "Gracie, dear, why don't you go inside and start your homework? I need to talk to your father for a minute." Once Gracie was inside, Mrs. Lavelle gestured to the wooden bench on her front porch. "Sit," she commanded in that no-nonsense tone that reminded Tom of his own mother. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Tom sank onto the bench, his shoulders heavy. The old wood creaked beneath him as Mrs. Lavelle settled beside him, her keen eyes studying his face. "Maybe I have," he admitted quietly. "Want to tell me about it?" She didn't push, just waited patiently as the evening breeze rustled through her rose garden. Tom ran a hand over his face, feeling the day's stubble beneath his palm. "Remember when I first moved here? When I was still struggling?" Mrs. Lavelle nodded. 7 years ago, you were newly sober and scared to death of messing up with Gracie. Before that, before I got clean." Tom's voice cracked slightly. "There was someone, Eva Bennett. She was everything I wasn't. Kind, stable, whole. We were together for almost 2 years. What happened?" Tom stared at his hands, calloused from years of physical labor. "I happened. My demons happened. I was drinking heavily, having nightmares about my time in the service. She tried to help, but he swallowed hard. I left her. Just walked away without even saying goodbye. It was right after." His voice trailed off. Mrs. Lavelle's weathered hand covered his. "Right after what, Tom?" "She was pregnant." The words came out barely above a whisper. "I found out later, through a mutual friend. By then, I was too ashamed to go back, too convinced she and the baby were better off without me. And today I pulled her out of an alley where 2 men were attacking her." Tom's voice shook. "She recognized me, said I looked just like the man who left her 11 years ago." Mrs. Lavelle was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. "The Lord works in mysterious ways. Tom Rourke, maybe it's time to face what you've been running from." The next morning, Tom stood in the hospital corridor beside Officer Martinez, who had responded to the incident. The officer's steady presence helped calm Tom's nerves, but his heart still hammered against his ribs. "Room 215, Martinez said softly. "She's been asking." "About you," Tom nodded, unable to form words. The short walk to Eva's room felt like miles. When he reached the doorway, he froze. Eva lay in the hospital bed, a bruise darkening her left cheek. Her dark hair was streaked with silver now, but her eyes, those gentle brown eyes that had once looked at him with such love, were exactly as he remembered them. "Tom," she said simply, and the sound of his name on her lips nearly brought him to his knees. "Eva." His voice was rough with emotion. "I'm so sorry about yesterday. About everything." She managed a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You saved my life yesterday. That counts for something." An uncomfortable silence filled the room until Eva reached for her purse on the bedside table. Her hands trembled slightly as she withdrew a photograph. "There's someone you should meet," she said quietly, holding out the picture. Tom took it with unsteady hands. The photo showed a boy of about 11, with serious eyes, and a hesitant smile. Tom's own eyes stared back at him from the boy's face. "His name is Noah," Eva said softly. "He's your son." The world tilted sideways. Tom stared at the photograph, taking in every detail of the boy's face, the shape of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, the furrow between his brows that Tom saw every morning in his own mirror. The word caught in his throat. Memories flooded his mind. The nights he'd spent drinking to forget, the morning he'd walked away, all the years of wondering about the child he'd abandoned before it was even born. The weight of his choices crashed down on him like a physical blow. Without warning, Tom turned and bolted from the room. He heard Eva call his name, heard Martinez's concerned voice, but he couldn't stop. He ran down the corridor, past startled nurses and concerned visitors, his feet carrying him away from the truth he'd spent 11 years trying to outrun. He didn't stop until he reached the hospital parking lot, where he doubled over, hands on his knees, struggling to breathe. The photograph was still clutched in his hand, crumpled slightly at the edges. Through blurred vision, he looked at his son's face again. "God," he whispered, his voice breaking. "What have I done?" The digital clock on Tom's nightstand glowed 2:17 a.m., its red numbers harsh in the darkness of his bedroom. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning lazy circles above him. Sleep refused to come, chased away by memories he'd locked away years ago. His mind drifted back to that awful day in Afghanistan, the screaming, the explosion, his commanding officer's stern face as he read out the charges: conduct unbecoming, dereliction of duty, unauthorized absence from post. The words still burned in his ears like hot coals. Tom pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, trying to push back the images, but they kept coming, relentless as waves against a shore. The day he'd received his dishonorable discharge, the shame that followed him home, the first bottle he'd grabbed at the corner store, telling himself it would help him forget. Rolling out of bed, Tom padded barefoot to the kitchen. His feet carried him to the cabinet above the refrigerator where he kept one bottle of whiskey, unopened for 8 years now, a reminder of what he'd overcome and what he could still lose. His fingers traced the dusty label. The glass felt cool against his palm, familiar and dangerous. For a long moment, he stood there, wrestling with the urge to twist off the cap, to let the amber liquid wash away the day's revelations. Eva's face flashed in his mind, not as she'd looked today in that alley, but as she'd been 11 years ago. Her bright smile, those kind eyes that had seen past his uniform to the man beneath. "No," Tom whispered, setting the bottle back with trembling hands. He wouldn't throw away 8 years of sobriety. Not tonight, not ever. Gracie needed him whole. Morning came too, quickly, sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows as Tom mechanically packed Gracie's lunch. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, evidence of his sleepless night. "Dad?" Gracie's voice cut through his fog. She stood in the doorway, already dressed for school, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Are you okay? You look tired." Tom managed a weak smile. "Just didn't sleep great, sweetie. Nothing to worry about." But Gracie, perceptive as always, wasn't fooled. She crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Is it because of the lady you helped yesterday? Mrs. Lavelle said you seemed upset when you came home." Tom's throat tightened. He rested a hand on his daughter's head, grateful for her innocent comfort. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings about things that happened in the past, but I'm okay, I promise. The drive to school was quieter than usual. Tom caught Gracie watching him with worried eyes several times, but he couldn't find the words to ease her concern. How could he explain something he barely understood himself? After dropping her off, Tom called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. He needed space to think, to process. His truck seemed to know where he was headed before he did, taking the familiar route to Lake Morrison. The lake was deserted this early on a weekday. Tom parked in his usual spot, where the shore curved gently and old willows dipped their branches into the water. He'd spent countless hours here during his early recovery, finding peace in the quiet ripples and steady horizon. Memories of Ava flooded back, no longer held at bay by his careful walls of denial. Their first meeting at the USO event near base, her volunteering, him on a brief leave between deployments. The way she'd laughed at his terrible jokes, how her hand had felt in his. 3 precious months of coffee dates and long talks about their dreams for the future. Then the sudden reassignment. Everything had happened so fast. Barely time for goodbye before he was shipping out again. He'd given her his military post office address, promised to write, but no letters ever came. I thought she'd moved on, Tom whispered to the lake. Thought maybe she'd realized a soldier with demons wasn't worth waiting for, but she had written. Those letters had gone somewhere, disappeared into the vast military postal system, taking with them any chance of knowing about his son. His son? The words felt foreign in his mind, heavy with possibility and regret. Noah. Eva had called him Noah. Tom picked up a flat stone, turning it over in his calloused hands. How many birthdays had he missed? First steps, first words, first day of school, all gone. Lost to time and circumstance. The stone slipped from his fingers, plopping into the water with barely a ripple. The morning sun climbed higher, warming his face, but Tom felt cold inside. He'd built a life from the ashes of his military career, fought his way back from addiction, one day at a time. Gracie had been his anchor, his reason to keep going when shame and guilt threatened to drag him under. But now there was Noah. Another child he'd failed before even knowing he existed. The weight of it pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. What would Eva tell their son about him? That his father was a disgraced soldier who'd turned to the bottle? That he'd disappeared without a trace? Another deadbeat dad who'd abandoned his responsibilities? Tom dug his fingers into the sandy soil beneath him. The truth was both better and worse. He'd never known, never had the chance to choose. But would that matter to an 11-year-old boy who'd grown up without a father? His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably work wondering where he was. Tom ignored it, watching a pair of ducks glide across the lake's surface, leaving gentle ripples in their wake. The peaceful scene stood in stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. He'd have to face Eva, eventually. Have to look into those eyes that had once looked at him with such trust, and explain himself. The thought made his stomach churn. What could he possibly say to make up for 11 years of absence? How could he face the consequences of a choice he never knew he was making? The morning stretched on, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Tom sat motionless, lost in memories of what was and thoughts of what could have been, while the gentle lap of water against the shore marked time's steady march forward. 3 days crawled by like molasses in winter. The early October morning brought a gentle breeze that rustled through the maple trees lining the elementary school's playground. Eva Bennett stood at the entrance of Lincoln Elementary, her heart thumping against her ribs. Her bruises had faded to a dull yellow, hidden beneath carefully applied makeup, but her hands still trembled slightly as she pushed open the heavy glass doors. "Welcome to Lincoln Elementary, Miss Bennett." Principal Roberts extended her hand with a warm smile. "We're so grateful you've offered to help with our after-school reading program." Eva adjusted her navy cardigan, trying to project confidence she didn't quite feel. "Thank you for having me. After everything that happened, I needed something positive to focus on." The principal's expression softened with understanding. "Sometimes the best medicine is helping others. Let me show you to the library." The school library was a cozy space filled with child-sized tables and cheerful posters, encouraging reading. Afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, warming the worn carpet beneath their feet. A small group of children sat cross-legged on colorful cushions, waiting for the session to begin. Among them was a bright-eyed girl with copper-colored braids who immediately caught Eva's attention. The child practically bounced with energy, her smile infectious as she waved enthusiastically. "Hi, I'm Gracie," she chirped, scooting over to make room on her cushion. "Are you our new reading helper?" Eva felt her anxiety melt away under the warmth of that genuine welcome. "Yes, I am. I'm Miss Bennett, but you can call me Eva. You look like sunshine," Gracie declared with the absolute certainty only a 10-year-old could muster. "Can I call you Miss Sunshine instead?" A surprised laugh bubbled up from Eva's chest, the first real laugh she'd had in days. "That's quite a nickname. Why Sunshine?" Gracie tilted her head thoughtfully. "Because you smile with your eyes. just like the sun when it comes out from behind clouds. My dad says those are the best kind of smiles because they're real. Something about the girl's earnest observation touched Eva deeply. Your dad sounds very wise. He is. Gracie beamed. He's the best dad ever. He makes funny faces when he packs my lunch and knows exactly how to fix anything that's broken. For the next hour, Eva led the children through their reading exercises, but she found herself continuously drawn to Gracie's enthusiastic participation and clever comments. The girl had a way of making the other children feel included, gently helping those who struggled with difficult words. That evening, Tom stood at the stove, stirring a pot of mac and cheese, Gracie's favorite comfort food. His daughter sat at their small kitchen table, homework spread out before her, but she seemed more interested in chatting than solving math problems. And then Miss Sunshine helped Joey sound out extraordinary by breaking it into little pieces. Gracie's fork waved in the air as she spoke. She's so patient, Dad. Not like Mrs. Peterson, who gets all huffy when someone's too slow. Tom's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. Miss Sunshine? Well, her real name is Miss Bennett. But I gave her a nickname because she makes the whole room brighter when she smiles. Gracie shoveled another forkful of macaroni into her mouth. She got hurt by some bad guys, but she's okay now. Can you comment? Believe she still wants to help people after that? The spoon clattered against the pot's edge. Tom gripped the counter, his knuckles white. Eva. At his daughter's school, the universe had a cruel sense of humor. Dad? Gracie's voice held a note of concern. Are you okay? You look kind of pale. Tom forced his features into what he hoped was a reassuring expression. Just tired, sweetheart. Tell me more about your reading group. The next afternoon, Tom pulled into the school pickup line earlier than usual, his stomach churning with anxiety. He'd spent the whole day wrestling with whether to tell Gracie about Eva, about their past, about Noah. But how do you explain something like that to a 10-year-old when you can barely face it yourself? He watched the school doors, his heart hammering as children spilled out into the sunshine. Then he saw them, Eva and Gracie, walking side by side. Eva was carrying a stack of books, listening intently as Gracie gestured animatedly about something. Through the windshield, Tom saw the exact moment recognition hit. Eva stopped mid-step, her face draining of color. The books slipped from her grasp, scattering across the sidewalk. Gracie immediately dropped to help gather them, but Eva stood frozen, her eyes locked on Tom's through the car window. He could read the questions in her expression, the dawning understanding as she looked between him and Gracie. His daughter's copper braids, the same shade as his own hair had been before it started graying, the way she scrunched her nose when concentrating, just like he did. Gracie bounded up to the car, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. Dad, this is Miss Sunshine. She dropped her books, but we picked them all up. And guess what? She said I could help organize the reading corner tomorrow. Tom forced himself to step out of the car on legs that felt like lead. That's great, sweetheart. Mr. Rourke. Eva managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She clutched the rescued books to her chest like a shield. Miss Bennett. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, too formal, too distant for all the history between them. Gracie looked between them, her smile fading as she sensed the strange atmosphere. Do you two know each other? Neither adult answered immediately. The autumn breeze stirred fallen leaves around their feet, and somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked. The moment stretched like taffy, sweet and painful all at once. Finally, Eva found her voice. We knew each other a long time ago. Really? Gracie's eyes lit up with interest. From where? Before either could respond, another parent called out to Eva with a question about the reading program. She took a half step backward, visibly relieved for the interruption. I should go. It was nice seeing you, Mr. Rourke. Goodbye, Gracie. I'll see you tomorrow. Tom watched her hurry away, her cardigan fluttering in the breeze. Gracie climbed into the car, still bubbling with questions, but Tom could barely hear them over the roaring in his ears. All he could think about was the look in Eva's eyes, the same look she'd had in the hospital, filled with recognition, pain, and something else he couldn't quite name. Something that looked dangerously like hope. 3 days crawled by like molasses in winter. The early October morning brought a gentle breeze that rustled through the maple trees lining the elementary school's playground. Eva Bennett stood at the entrance of Lincoln Elementary, her heart thumping against her ribs. Her bruises had faded to a dull yellow, barely visible beneath her carefully applied makeup. She watched as parents arrived one by one to pick up their children, Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her cardigan, a nervous habit she'd never quite shaken. The school bell rang, and moments later, children poured out of the building like confetti thrown to the wind. Then she saw him. Tom Rourke's broad shoulders were unmistakable, even after all these years. He wore faded jeans and a worn leather jacket, his silver-streaked hair catching the afternoon sun. Beside him skipped Gracie, sweet, bright-eyed Gracie, chattering away about her day. Eva's throat tightened. She took one step forward, then another, each footfall feeling like lead. "Tom," she called out softly, but her voice carried on the breeze. Tom froze mid-stride. Gracie looked up at her father, then at Eva, her small face scrunched in confusion. "Miss Sunshine?" she asked, glancing between the two adults. "Honey," Tom's voice was gentle but strained. "Why don't you go wait by the truck? I need to talk to Miss Bennett for a minute." Gracie nodded slowly, her backpack bouncing as she walked to their old blue pickup. She kept looking back, curiosity evident in her expression. Tom turned to face Eva fully, his jaw tense. The years had carved deeper lines around his eyes, but they were still the same warm brown, she remembered, now clouded, with uncertainty and what looked like shame. "Eva, he started, but she held up a hand. "Could we move over there?" She gestured to a quiet spot near the maple trees, away from the bustling pickup area. Tom nodded, following her lead. The fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet as they walked. Eva wrapped her arms around herself, though it wasn't from the cold. "I looked for you, Tom," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "For months after you disappeared, I tried everything I could think of." Tom's face crumpled. "I never knew. They reassigned me so quickly, and then everything went to hell in Kandahar." He stopped, swallowing hard. "But that's no excuse." "My letters?" Eva asked, though she already knew the answer. "Never got them. Not one." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. "By the time I was stateside again, I wasn't in a good place, Eva. But if I'd known about Noah," the name hung between them like a physical thing. Tom nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he did, his voice was rough with emotion. "Your parents? They made you give him up?" Eva's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "They said it was for the best. Single mother, no father in the picture, working minimum wage. They painted a pretty bleak picture." She let out a bitter laugh. "They had it all arranged before I even left the hospital. A private adoption." "God, Eva, I'm so sorry." The words seemed to tear from him. "I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I never meant to abandon you. Either of you." A young mother hurried past with two small children, and Eva waited until they were out of earshot. "I believe you," she said quietly. "I've had 11 years to think about it, and I know you, Tom, the real you. You wouldn't have walked away if you'd known." His shoulders sagged with relief, though the guilt remained etched in his features. "No, I wouldn't have." He glanced over at Gracie, who was reading a book in the truck. "Being a father, it's everything to me now." Eva followed his gaze, a small smile touching her lips. "She's wonderful, Tom. In my class, she's like a little ray of sunshine." "Yeah, she's something special." Pride and love softened his expression momentarily before the weight of their situation settled back in. Eva took a deep breath. "Listen, Tom, there's so much more we need to talk about. Would you be willing to meet me for coffee tomorrow? Somewhere quiet where we can really talk?" Tom's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and years of regret. "I know it's a lot," Eva added quickly. "And if you're not ready—" "No," Tom interrupted. Then gentler. "No, you're right. We need to talk. There's a little place called Mary's on 5th Street. They open early." "I know it." 7 o'clock? Tom nodded, his eyes meeting hers fully for the first time. 7 works. I'll be there after I drop Gracie at school." Eva felt something shift in her chest, like a door long rusted shut, creaking open just a fraction. "Thank you," she said softly. They stood there for a moment longer, the weight of 11 years and all their unspoken words hanging between them. Then Gracie's voice called out, "Dad, are we going to be late for my piano lesson?" Tom straightened, clearing his throat. "Coming, sweetie." He turned back to Eva. "Tomorrow then?" "Tomorrow," she confirmed, watching as he walked back to his truck, his steps heavy but determined. As Tom helped Gracie into the passenger seat, Eva could hear her asking, Why were you talking to Miss Sunshine, Dad? The truck's door closed before she could hear his response. Eva stood under the maple tree until the blue pickup disappeared around the corner, leaves continuing to fall around her like quiet tears. The Bell's Corner Cafe sat nestled between a bookstore and a flower shop, its red-striped awning fluttering in the crisp autumn breeze. Tom arrived 15 minutes early, his hands stuffed deep in his jacket pockets as he paced outside. The familiar urge to run tugged at him, but he planted his feet firmly on the sidewalk. Eva appeared right on time, wearing a soft blue sweater that made her eyes shine even brighter. She gave him a small wave, and Tom's heart squeezed in his chest. "I got us a quiet table in the back," she said softly, leading the way inside. The cafe smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls, and old-fashioned jazz played quietly in the background. They settled into a corner booth, a worn wooden table between them. A young waitress bounced over, her ponytail swinging, and took their orders. Black coffee for Tom, chamomile tea for Eva. The silence stretched between them like a rubber band ready to snap. Tom's fingers drummed against his coffee mug, his eyes fixed on the swirling dark liquid. "You look good, Tom," Eva finally said, her voice gentle. "Healthy." He let out a bitter laugh. "Looks can be deceiving." "No, I mean it." She wrapped her hands around her teacup. "There's a steadiness to you now. I can see it in how you are with Gracie." The mention of his daughter made Tom's shoulders straighten. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me. Saved my life, really." Eva's eyes softened. "She's wonderful, so bright and kind. You've done an amazing job with her." "I try," Tom said, his voice rough. "Every day, I try to be better for her." Eva took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around her cup. "Tom, there's something I need to tell you about Noah." Tom's heart rate picked up. "The boy in the photo?" She nodded, blinking back tears. "He's in foster care now. His adoptive parents died 6 months ago in a car crash on Interstate 80. The words hit Tom like a physical blow. He sat back, stunned. "Foster care?" "Yes." Eva's voice cracked. "I've been trying to get custody, but there are complications. The system. It's not simple." Tom's mind raced with images of an unknown boy, his boy alone in the system. "How? How is he?" "He's hurting," Eva said quietly. "He's quiet, draws a lot, smart as a whip, but keeps to himself. The social workers say he's having trouble adjusting." Tom pushed his coffee aside, feeling sick. "I should have been there. All these years." "You didn't know," Eva interrupted. "I tried to find you, Tom. For months after you disappeared, I wrote letters, made calls. Your unit said you'd been discharged, but no one would tell me where you'd gone." "I was a mess," Tom admitted, shame coating his words. "After the discharge, I spent years at the bottom of a bottle. Didn't want to be found." Eva reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. "But you're not that person anymore. I can see that." Tom shook his head, self-loathing rising like bile. "I'm nobody's idea of father material. Got a record, work as a garbage man, barely keeping it together most days." "Stop it," Eva said, firmly. "I've seen you with Gracie. You're exactly what that little girl needs, what any child needs. Someone who shows up, who tries, who loves them completely." "Eva," Tom's voice was hoarse. "Noah deserves to know the truth," she pressed on. "He deserves to know his father, and you deserve to know your son." Tom's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the table. "What if I mess it up? What if I hurt him like I hurt you? The fact that you're asking those questions tells me everything I need to know." Eva's eyes were fierce with conviction. The Tom I knew 11 years ago wouldn't have cared enough to worry. The weight of possibility pressed against Tom's chest. What would I even say to him? The truth? Eva said simply, that you didn't know about him. But now that you do, you want to know him. No promises, no pressure. Just a chance. Tom rubbed his face with his hands, memories of his own father's abandonment surfacing. "When?" "He's at the Riverside Children's Home," Eva said. "I can arrange a visit whenever you're ready." Tom looked at Eva, really looked at her. The years had added subtle lines around her eyes, but her gaze still held that same warmth that had drawn him in all those years ago. She'd survived her own battles, carried her own guilt, yet here she sat, offering him a chance he didn't deserve. "I need time," he said finally, "to think, to process this." Eva nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Of course. But Tom?" She waited until he met her gaze. "Don't take too long. Noah's waited 11 years already. The truth of her words settled over them like a heavy blanket. Outside the cafe window, leaves danced across the sidewalk, red and gold against the gray concrete. Time was moving forward, whether Tom was ready or not. "I'll do it," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I want to meet him." Eva's smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "Really?" Tom nodded. Terror and hope warring in his chest. "I can't promise I'll be any good at this, but you're right. He deserves to know the truth. And maybe," he swallowed hard, "maybe it's time I face mine too." The foster home stood like a faded postcard from the 1950 seconds, a two-story colonial with peeling white paint and dark green shutters. Tom's truck idled in the driveway next to Eva's sedan, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Eva tapped gently on his window. "You ready?" Tom cut the engine but didn't move. "What if he hates me?" "Noah's a good kid," Eva said softly. "Just be yourself." Tom stepped out of the truck, his work boots crunching on the gravel. The autumn wind rustled through his gray-flecked hair as they walked up the concrete path. Dead leaves skittered across their feet. Director Harris met them at the door, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the afternoon sun. His expression was professionally neutral, but Tom caught the slight narrowing of his eyes. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Rourke. Please, come in." The interior smelled of lemon cleaning products and something baking chocolate chip cookies, Tom guessed. Children's artwork dotted the walls, bright splashes of crayon and paint that made his heart ache thinking of Gracie's drawings on their fridge at home. "Noah's in the study room," Director Harris said, leading them down a hallway. "He's been informed about the visit, but please understand, he may need time to process this." They stopped outside a door decorated with paper autumn leaves. Through the window, Tom could see a boy sitting at a desk, bent over what looked like a drawing pad. His dark hair fell across his forehead just like Tom's did at that age. Eva squeezed Tom's arm gently. "Ready?" He wasn't, not even close. But he nodded anyway. Director Harris knocked softly and opened the door. "Noah, you have visitors." The boy looked up, his pencil stilling mid-stroke. His eyes, Tom's eyes, moved from Eva to Tom, then back to his drawing. He didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. "Hi, Noah," Eva said warmly, stepping into the room. "This is Tom. He's someone very special who wanted to meet you." Tom's throat felt desert dry as he followed Eva inside. He'd faced firefights in the army with less anxiety than he felt right now. "Hey there," he managed, his voice rougher than he intended. Noah set his pencil down carefully, like he was handling something fragile. "Hi," he said quietly. His voice was soft but clear, reminding Tom of morning mist over still water. Director Harris hovered in the doorway. "I'll give you folks some privacy. I'll be right down the hall if needed." Tom noticed Noah's shoulders tense slightly at those words. The boy's fingers curled around the edge of his drawing pad protectively. Tom recognized that guardedness. He'd seen it in his own mirror for years after coming home from the war. "That's some nice artwork you've got there," Tom said, gesturing to the pad. "My daughter Gracie likes to draw, too." Something flickered in Noah's eyes. Interest? Maybe curiosity? "You have a daughter?" "Yeah," Tom smiled, feeling some of his nervousness ease. "She's 10. Loves drawing horses mostly, though they all end up looking more like dogs with long necks." That earned him the ghost of a smile from Noah. Eva pulled up a chair, leaving comfortable space between them and Noah. "Would you like to show us what you're working on?" Noah hesitated, then slowly turned his drawing pad around. The page showed a detailed sketch of a park scene: trees, a playground, people walking dogs. The perspective was slightly off, but the attention to detail was impressive. "This is really good," Tom said, meaning it. "You've got a real talent there." "Thanks," Noah mumbled, but Tom caught the slight flush of pride on his cheeks. They talked about art for a while, Noah gradually becoming more animated as he showed them other drawings. Tom shared stories about Gracie's artistic mishaps, and even Eva admitted to being terrible at stick figures. All too soon, Director Harris reappeared. "I'm afraid we'll need to wrap up soon." Noah's walls came back up instantly, his shoulders hunching slightly. Tom felt an overwhelming urge to protect him, to somehow make this easier. "Thank you for sharing your art with us," Tom said sincerely. "Maybe next time I could bring some of Gracie's drawings to show you?" Noah looked up sharply at the words, "next time," hope and wariness battling in his expression. "Okay," he said finally. The drive back was quiet at first, both Tom and Eva lost in their thoughts. The late afternoon sun painted everything in soft gold, including the tears Tom noticed Eva wiping away when she thought he wasn't looking. Finally, Tom broke the silence. "He's amazing," he said softly, "and he's been through so much." Eva nodded. "He has, but he's strong, like his father." Tom's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm not. Eva, there's things you need to know about why I disappeared, about what happened after." He pulled into an empty church parking lot, killing the engine. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush the PTSD that had nearly destroyed him, the drinking, the long climb back to sobriety. He told her about the day he'd found Gracie abandoned at a shelter where he was doing community service, how caring for her had given him purpose again. "She saved my life," he finished, his voice rough with emotion. "Made me want to be better, but I'm not who you remember, Eva. I'm not sure I can be what Noah needs." Eva was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "The man I remember wouldn't have run into that alley to help a stranger. He wouldn't have spent 8 years raising a little girl on his own. And he certainly wouldn't be sitting here right now, terrified of not being good enough for his son." She turned to face him fully. "You're not perfect, Tom. None of us are. But I've seen how you are, with Gracie, and I saw you with Noah today. You're exactly what he needs, what we both need. You just have to believe it too." Tom stared out at the setting sun, Eva's words settling into the cracks of his doubt like golden light. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Hope. The foster home's visiting room felt sterile and cold, despite Mrs. Carter's attempts to make it homey with potted plants and framed photographs. Tom sat stiffly on the worn blue couch, watching Noah sketch in his notebook. The boy's dark hair fell over his eyes, just like Tom's used to at that age. "You like to draw?" Tom asked softly. Noah nodded without looking up, his pencil moving in careful strokes across the paper. Eva sat nearby, her presence warm and steady. She'd been coaching Tom through these visits, helping him find ways to connect. "Noah's quite the artist," she said. "He won first place in his school's art fair last year." A slight pink touched Noah's cheeks at the praise, though he remained focused on his drawing. Over the next few weeks, their visits fell into a gentle rhythm. Sometimes they'd play board games. Other times, they'd just talk or sit in comfortable silence while Noah drew. Tom began bringing small treats that Mrs. Carter approved: colored pencils, sketch pads, and once, a model car kit they could build together. On their fourth visit, Tom brought Gracie. She bounced into the visiting room like a ray of sunshine, her pigtails swinging. "Hi, I'm Gracie," she announced, plopping down next to Noah. "What are you drawing?" Noah hesitated, then tilted his sketchbook. "It's a dragon." "Cool, I love dragons. Can you teach me how to draw one?" The adults watched in amazement as Noah's usual reserve melted. He tore a page from his sketchbook, handed Gracie a pencil, and began showing her how to sketch the basic shapes. Eva leaned close to Tom, whispering, "She's remarkable. She gets that from her mother," Tom said, automatically, then caught himself. "I mean, it's okay." Eva touched his arm gently. "We all have our stories." The next weekend, Mrs. Carter approved an outing to Thompson Park. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under their feet as they walked the trails. Noah stayed close to Tom, asking quiet questions about his job, his time in the Army, his favorite foods. Tom answered each one honestly, careful to keep the harder truths age-appropriate. Gracie skipped ahead with Eva, their laughter floating back through the trees. They stopped at a small playground, and Noah hesitated at the swings. "Want to push?" Tom offered. Noah nodded, climbing onto the seat. Tom gave gentle pushes, gradually increasing the height as Noah grew more comfortable. A smile, the first real one Tom had seen, spread across the boy's face. "Higher!" Noah called out, and Tom's heart swelled. They had lunch at picnic tables near the duck pond. Eva had packed sandwiches, fruit, and homemade cookies. Gracie taught Noah how to feed the ducks without getting pecked, while Eva shared stories about her work at the school. "Miss Sunshine tells the best stories during library time," Gracie declared, using her nickname for Eva. "She does all the voices." Noah looked at Eva hopefully. "Could you tell one now?" Eva launched into an animated tale about a lonely dragon who found his family in unexpected places. Tom watched her, mesmerized by the way she brought the story to life, by how naturally she connected with both children. As the afternoon wound down, Noah grew quiet again. "Do we have to go back?" he asked, his voice small. Tom's chest tightened. "For now, buddy, but we'll see you again soon." That night, after tucking Gracie in, Tom found himself pulling out an old journal, a gift from his AA sponsor years ago. He hadn't written in it since getting his 5-year chip, but now words poured onto the page. "Saw Noah smile today. Real smile, not the polite one he usually wears. Gracie's already calling him her brother. She has such a big heart. And Eva, watching her with the kids, it's like seeing the family we could have been. The family we might still be, if I'm brave enough to try." He described the way Noah's face lit up on the swings, how Gracie automatically saved half her cookies for her new friend, how Eva seemed to know exactly what each child needed in any moment. The words helped him sort through the tangle of emotions he'd been carrying. "I've spent so long believing I didn't deserve a second chance," he wrote, "but maybe that's not my choice to make. Maybe it's about what Noah deserves, what Gracie deserves, what Eva deserves, a real family, a fresh start." Tom closed the journal, running his hand over its worn cover. Through his bedroom window, he could see the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. For the first time in years, he let himself imagine a different future. Breakfast together around their small kitchen table, helping with homework, weekend trips to the park. Eva's smile over morning coffee, Noah's drawings on the fridge, Gracie's laughter filling every room. It terrified him how much he wanted it, how much he could lose if he messed up again. But as he thought about Noah's smile on the swings, Gracie's immediate acceptance, and Eva's unwavering faith in him, Tom felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. He pulled out his phone and sent Eva a text. "Thank you for today. It meant everything." Her reply came quickly. "They're amazing together, aren't they? Just like someone else I know." Tom stared at the heart emoji for a long time, his own heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm of possibility and promise. He set his phone aside and picked up the journal again, needing to capture more of this feeling before it slipped away. The words came easier now, filling page after page with hopes he'd never dared voice before. The fluorescent lights of the foster agency buzzed overhead as Tom sat in. Social worker Melissa Gaines's cramped office. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, and her desk overflowed with manila folders and post-it notes. She shuffled through Tom's paperwork with pursed lips. "Mr. Rourke," Melissa said, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses, "there's something concerning in your background check." Her tone was professional but cool. A criminal charge from 8 years ago? Assault and battery in a bar fight? Tom's stomach clenched. He gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles turning white. "That was before I got sober. I haven't had a drink in 7 years. "I understand that," Melissa replied, "but Director Harris is very particular about these things." She pulled out another form. The charge, combined with your military discharge status. She let the sentence hang in the air. Tom leaned forward. "I've changed. I have a steady job, a home. I'm raising my daughter, who you have sole custody of." "Yes." Melissa's pen tapped against her desk. "But taking on another child, especially given Noah's recent trauma with losing his adoptive parents, Director Harris will need convincing that you're stable enough." The word stable hit Tom like a physical blow. He thought of Noah's cautious smile at the park last weekend, of how the boy's eyes had lit up when Gracie showed him how to make paper airplanes. "What can I do?" Tom's voice was rough. "There has to be something." Melissa sighed, her professional mask slipping slightly. "Get letters of recommendation from employers, neighbors, anyone who can speak to your character now. We'll need proof of your ongoing sobriety, and," she hesitated, "it would help if you had a strong support system. A partner, perhaps?" Tom's thoughts immediately went to Eva, her unwavering belief in him, despite everything. "I'll get those letters," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes." The drive home felt endless. Tom's hands were steady on the wheel, but his mind raced. The setting sun cast long shadows across the street as he pulled into his driveway. Inside, Eva was helping Gracie with her homework at the kitchen table. The sight of them together, heads bent over a math worksheet, made his heart ache. "Dad!" Gracie bounced up from her chair. "Miss Sunshine helped me figure out fractions, and guess what? I got the lead in the school play." Tom managed to smile, ruffling her hair. "That's great, sweetheart. Why don't you go practice your lines while I talk to Eva for a minute?" Eva must have read something in his expression because she stood up, concern crossing her face. "Gracie, honey, your script is in your backpack." Once Gracie had bounded upstairs, Tom sank into a kitchen chair. Eva sat beside him, her hand finding his across the table. "The social worker found my record," he said quietly. "The bar fight from before I got sober, and with my discharge." He swallowed hard. "They're worried I'm not stable enough for Noah." Eva's fingers tightened around his. "Tom, look at me." She waited until he met her eyes. "You are not that person anymore. I've seen how you are with Gracie, with Noah. We'll fight this together." "What if they're right?" The words tumbled out before he could stop them. "What if I'm not good enough?" Noah deserves a father who will love him," Eva cut in firmly. "Who will show up every day and try his best. That's you, Tom. And you're not alone in this." From upstairs came the sound of Gracie practicing her lines, her voice carrying clearly, and then the ugly duckling realized he had become a beautiful swan. Eva smiled softly. "Speaking of which, Gracie asked me to come to her recital next week." She was so excited she could barely get the words out. Tom felt something warm bloom in his chest, pushing back against the cold fear. "She adores you, you know. Talks about Miss Sunshine all the time." The feeling's mutual. Eva's eyes grew misty. "She's an amazing kid, Tom. You did that. You raised her to be kind and brave and full of joy. That's what matters, not what's in some old police report." Tom looked down at their joined hands, thinking of all the mornings he'd gotten up at dawn, all the bedtime stories, all the small moments that added up to a life rebuilt. He thought of Noah's face lighting up when Gracie taught him to skip rocks at the park, of Eva's steady presence beside him. "We'll need reference letters," he said finally. "From my boss, neighbors, my AA sponsor, and," he hesitated, "they said having a strong support system would help, a partner." Eva squeezed his hand. "Then that's what we'll do. One step at a time." "Miss Sunshine," Gracie called down the stairs. "Can you help me with my swan movements? Dad's terrible at being graceful." Eva laughed, the sound bright in the worried air. "Coming, sweetheart." She stood but paused to press a kiss to Tom's temple. "We're in this together," she whispered. "All of us." Tom watched her head upstairs, listening to Gracie's delighted giggles as Eva presumably demonstrated proper swan technique. Hope and fear tangled in his chest. Hope for what could be, fear of losing it all. But Eva's words echoed in his mind. Together. Maybe that was enough to start with. He pulled out his phone and started making a list of people to ask for letters. His AA sponsor would help. Mrs. Lavelle next door had known him for years. His boss at the sanitation department had given him a chance when nobody else would. One step at a time, he reminded himself. One step at a time. The elementary school auditorium hummed with excitement as parents filled the rows of metal folding chairs. Tom shifted in his seat, tugging at his collar. He'd worn his good blue shirt, the one Gracie had picked out for him at the department store last Christmas. The familiar scent of floor wax and fresh paint brought back memories of his own school days, though he couldn't remember ever having a recital himself. Eva sat 2 seats away, separated by Mrs. Lavelle, who had insisted on coming to see her honorary granddaughter perform. The old woman's eyes were already misty behind her thick glasses, and the show hadn't even started. The lights dimmed, and Principal Matthews stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone. "Welcome, parents and families, to our annual spring musical showcase." Tom's eyes fixed on the heavy red curtain, knowing Gracie was behind it somewhere. She'd practiced her song for weeks, filling their small house with her clear voice every evening. Even when she hit wrong notes, the joy in her singing had made him smile. The first few groups performed kindergartners stumbling through "You Are My Sunshine," 4th graders with their recorder ensemble, and the school band's slightly off-key rendition of "When the Saints Go Marching In." Then came the 5th grade choir. The curtain pulled back, revealing 24 children in white shirts and dark pants or skirts. Gracie stood in the second row, her honey brown, hair pulled back with the sparkly clips she'd begged Tom to buy. Her eyes scanned the audience until she found him, and her face lit up with a smile that made his heart squeeze. The piano introduction began, and the children's voices rose in harmony. They were singing "Bridge Over Troubled Water," and Gracie's voice carried the melody in the second verse. Tom glanced over at Eva and saw tears streaming down her cheeks. She wasn't even trying to wipe them away, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she watched Gracie sing. When the song ended, the audience burst into applause. Mrs. Lavelle dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, muttering, "That child is an angel, I tell you. An absolute angel." After the final performance, parents and children mingled in the school gymnasium where cookies and punch were being served. Gracie came running through the crowd, still in her concert outfit, and threw herself into Tom's arms. "Did you hear me, Dad? Did you see me?" Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "You were amazing, sweetheart." He kissed the top of her head. "I'm so proud of you." Eva approached them, holding something in her hands. "Gracie, you were wonderful." She knelt down to the girl's level. "I have something for you." A little congratulations gift. From her hands dangled a delicate gold chain with a small heart-shaped locket. Gracie's eyes widened. "For me?" Eva nodded, her voice soft. "My grandmother gave me one just like it when I was your age. It made me feel special, like I could keep my most precious memories close to my heart." She held it out. "Would you like me to put it on you?" Gracie nodded eagerly, turning around so Eva could fasten the chain around her neck. The locket gleamed against her white shirt. "It's beautiful," Gracie whispered, touching it with gentle fingers. "Thank you, Miss Sunshine." She threw her arms around Eva's neck in a tight hug. Tom watched them, something catching in his throat. Eva held Gracie like she was the most precious thing in the world, her eyes closed, a tear slipping down her cheek. Later that night, after ice cream celebrations and excited retellings of every moment, Tom tucked Gracie into bed. She was still wearing the locket. "Dad?" Her voice was sleepy but serious. "Yeah, sweetie? I really like Miss Sunshine. She played with the locket. She's so nice, and she smells like cookies, and she always listens to everything I say." There was a pause. I wish she could be my mom." Tom's heart stopped for a moment. He managed to kiss her forehead and whisper goodnight before leaving her room. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, slides down to sit on the floor, and let the tears come. They weren't sad tears, exactly, but they weren't purely happy either. They were complicated tears, full of hope and fear and possibility. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Tom had his usual early shift, but Eva had texted asking to meet him at their coffee shop afterward. He found her waiting, outside, wearing a light blue sweater that made her eyes look like summer sky. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi." He stood there, hands in his pockets, remembering Gracie's words from the night before. "You look tired," Eva said softly. "Didn't sleep much." She stepped closer. "Me neither. I kept thinking about last night, about Gracie, about—" She took a shaky breath. "About us." The morning sun caught in her hair, turning it to spun gold, just like he remembered from 11 years ago. Without thinking, he reached out and touched a strand that had fallen across her cheek. Eva's breath caught. She looked up at him, and suddenly they were both moving at the same time. His hands cupped her face as her arms went around his neck, and their lips met in a kiss that was both new and achingly familiar. It was gentle and sweet, tasting of coffee and possibility. When they pulled apart, Eva's eyes were shining. "I've missed you," she whispered against his lips. "Every single day." Tom pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. The morning traffic moved around them. People hurried past on their way to work, but for a moment, they stood still in their own pocket of time, holding each other like they'd never let go again. The kiss felt like coming home and starting fresh all at once. It felt like forgiveness and second chances. It felt like hope. Social worker Melissa Gaines's office felt smaller than Tom remembered. Maybe it was because this time there were 3 of them squeezed around her desk. Him, Eva, and Melissa all hunched over a stack of forms that seemed to multiply every time he blinked. "These are the initial guardianship petition forms," Melissa explained, her voice professional but not unkind. She separated the papers into neat piles. "We'll need detailed information about employment history, residence, financial stability, and character references." Tom's hands felt sweaty as he picked up the first form. The question stared back at him in stark, black and white. List all previous addresses for the past 10 years. Detail any criminal history. Provide proof of steady income. Ava must have sensed his tension because her hand found his under the alarm desk, giving it a gentle squeeze. "We'll go through it together," she said softly. Melissa clicked her pen, consulting her computer screen. "Mr. Rourke, given your history," she paused delicately, "we'll need particularly strong character references. The court will want assurance that your past issues are truly behind you." Tom nodded, his throat tight. "I understand. I can provide a reference," Eva offered quickly. "I've seen firsthand what an amazing father he is to Gracie." Melissa shook her head. I'm sorry, but as Noah's birth mother, your testimony won't carry the same weight. We need independent verification from community members who can speak to Mr. Rourke's character and stability. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Tom thought about who he could ask. The world had grown small over the years. Work, home, Gracie. He kept to himself mostly, except for… Would Officer Martinez count? He asked. He's known me since I got sober, helped me get back on my feet. Melissa's expression brightened slightly. A law enforcement officer would be excellent. Anyone else? Mrs. Lavelle, Eva suggested. She's been Tom and Gracie's neighbor for years. She's respected and the community president of the garden club, volunteers at the library. That would work. Melissa made a note. We'll need one more, preferably someone from a professional context. Tom rubbed his neck. My supervisor at the sanitation department, maybe? Frank's been my boss for 8 years now. Perfect. Melissa handed them each a thick packet. These forms need to be completed within 2 weeks. We'll also need to schedule a home study, and of course, there's the matter of the filing fees. I'll cover those, Eva interrupted firmly. Tom started to protest, but she shot him, a look that brooked no argument. They'd had this discussion before. Her social worker's salary was modest, but she had savings, and this was for their son. Their son. The words still felt strange in Tom's mind, like a shirt that didn't quite fit yet. Let's grab some lunch, Eva suggested as they left the office. We can start filling these out together. They found a quiet booth at the diner down the street. While they waited for their orders, Tom spread the papers across the table, careful to avoid the coffee rings. Look at this, he said, pointing to one form. They want tax returns from the last 3 years. Eva pulled out a small notebook from her purse. I'll make a list of everything we need to gather. We can't afford to miss anything. Their food arrived a club sandwich for Eva, meatloaf special for Tom, but neither paid much attention to eating. They were too busy working through the forms, Eva's neat handwriting filling in blanks while Tom dug through his phone for dates and addresses. The bell above the diner door chimed, and Officer Martinez walked in. Spotting them, he made his way to their booth. Tom, Eva, he nodded warmly. How are things going with the petition? Actually, Tom said, we were hoping to talk to you about that. We need character references. Martinez's weathered face broke into a smile. Say no more. I'd be honored. He pulled up a chair. Want me to do it now? Eva quickly handed him one of the reference forms. Martinez read it carefully, then began writing in his careful script. Tom tried not to read over his shoulder, but he caught phrases like demonstrated remarkable transformation and exemplary father. When he finished, Martinez squeezed Tom's shoulder. You're doing good work, son. Both of you are. That boy deserves a family who'll love him. After Martinez left, Tom and Eva walked to Mrs. Lavelle's house. They found her tending her prized rose bushes, garden gloves covered in dirt. Well, it's about time, she declared when they explained their request. I've been waiting to sing your praises, Tom Rourke. Though heaven knows you don't make it easy, being such a quiet sort. She insisted they come inside while she wrote her letter. Her tiny living room was cluttered with photos, including several of Gracie at various ages. Mrs. Lavelle settled at her writing desk, her pen scratching across the paper as she described Tom's dedication as a father, his reliability as a neighbor, his quiet acts of kindness that she'd witnessed over the years. Their final stop was the sanitation department office. Frank was on the phone when they arrived, but he waved them in, holding up one finger. Sorry about that, he said after hanging up. Budget meetings. Now, what can I do for you two? Tom explained their situation, feeling awkward, asking for help, but Frank was already reaching for his letterhead before he finished. Tom's one of my best workers, he told Eva as he wrote. Never missed a shift, always willing to cover for others. Did you know he once worked a double on Christmas Eve so Johnson could be with his sick kid? He looked up at Tom. People notice these things, you know, even if you think they don't. By late afternoon, they had 3 sealed letters of reference. Eva held them carefully, like they were precious gems rather than simple papers. I can't believe how willing everyone was to help, Tom said softly as they walked to their cars. I can, Eva replied. You've built a life here, Tom, a good one. Maybe it's time you started seeing what others see in you. She stretched up on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek, then got into her car. Tom watched her drive away, the manila envelope with their paperwork tucked under his arm. The weight of it felt different now, less like a burden and more like a promise. He looked at his watch. Time to pick up Gracie from school, one step at a time, he reminded himself. That's how he'd built his life back up from nothing before. That's how they'd build this new family too, one careful step at a time. The autumn sunshine painted Franklin Park in shades of gold and crimson. The annual fall fair had transformed the usually quiet space into a wonderland of twinkling lights, cheerful music, and the mingling scents of cotton candy and caramel apples. Tom's weathered hands gripped the steering wheel as he pulled into the parking lot, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Look at all the rides. Gracie bounced in her seat, her face pressed against the window. Noah, sitting next to her in the back, tried to maintain his usual reserved expression, but his eyes sparkled with excitement. Eva touched Tom's arm gently as they parked. This was a wonderful idea, she said softly. The fair sprawled before them in a riot of color and motion. Children darted between game booths, while parents carried oversized stuffed animals and balanced paper plates loaded with fair food. The Ferris wheel rose above it all, its spokes gleaming in the afternoon light. "Can we try the ring toss?" Gracie asked, tugging at Tom's sleeve. Noah's never been to a fair before. Tom glanced at Noah, who shifted from foot to foot, looking uncertain but interested. "What do you say, buddy? Want to show these games? Who's boss?" "Okay, Mr. Tom," Noah said quietly, the corner of his mouth lifting in a small smile. The way he said Mr. Tom made something warm bloom in Tom's chest. They made their way to the ring toss booth where Tom demonstrated the technique. "It's all in the wrist," he explained, flicking his hand smoothly. The ring sailed through the air and landed perfectly around a bottleneck. "Dad's the best at this," Gracie declared proudly. She handed Noah some rings. "You try." Noah's first few throws missed, but Tom stood beside him, adjusting his stance and guiding his arm. "There you go, just like that," Tom encouraged. When Noah's ring finally clinked around a bottle, his face lit up with genuine joy. "I did it," he exclaimed, looking up at Tom with shining eyes. "You sure did, champion." Tom ruffled Noah's hair, and for the first time, the boy didn't flinch away from his touch. Eva watched them from a few steps back, her heart so full it ached. She remembered all those lonely nights wondering where Tom was, imagining what kind of father he might have been. Now she knew he was exactly the kind of father she'd always hoped he'd be. They wandered through the fair, stopping at various attractions. At the balloon dart game, Gracie won a small stuffed penguin, which she immediately gave to Noah. "For your collection," she said, remembering the few treasured stuffed animals he'd shown her at the foster home. Noah clutched the penguin close, looking touched and slightly overwhelmed by the gift. "Thanks," he whispered. The afternoon sun was beginning to soften when they reached the Ferris wheel. Noah hesitated at the base, his hand instinctively reaching for Tom's. "Nervous?" Tom asked gently. Giving the small hand in his a reassuring squeeze, Noah nodded slightly. "A little. Tell you what, you can sit right between Gracie and me. We won't let anything happen to you." They climbed into the carriage together, Noah sandwiched securely between them. As the wheel began to turn, his grip on Tom's hand tightened. But as they rose higher, his fear transformed into wonder. "Look!" he gasped, pointing at the sunset-painted sky. "We can see the whole town." Tom laughed, a deep, genuine sound that Eva hadn't heard since their reunion. She watched from the carriage behind them as father and son pointed out landmarks together, their heads bent close, while Gracie added her own excited commentary. When they reached the top, Noah's face broke into the biggest smile they'd seen yet. "This is amazing, Mr. Tom," he exclaimed, his usual reserve forgotten in the moment of pure joy. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of cotton candy, carousel rides, and shared laughter. As darkness fell, the fair lit up with thousands of twinkling lights, creating a magical atmosphere. They found a bench near the duck pond to rest and share a funnel cake, the powdered sugar leaving white dustings on their clothes. By the time they headed home, both kids were fighting to keep their eyes open. Noah fell asleep in the car, his new penguin clutched to his chest, while Gracie nodded off against his shoulder. Tom carried them both inside, one at a time, laying them gently on the living room couch. Eva covered them with soft blankets, tucking the edges around their sleeping forms. In the quiet kitchen, Tom made 2 cups of tea, setting one before Eva at the small table. The sounds of the fair still echoed in their minds, but this peaceful moment felt just as special. "I've never seen him so happy," Eva said softly, watching the steam rise from her cup. "The way he held your hand on the Ferris wheel, Tom's throat tightened with emotion. He's an amazing kid, Eva. They both are. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Today felt right, didn't it? All of us together? Eva reached across the table and took his hand. It felt like family, she whispered. I know we still have hurdles ahead with the guardianship petition, Tom said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. But watching them together today, seeing Noah come out of his shell, I want this, Eva. I want us to be a family. Even with all the complications? Eva asked, her voice trembling slightly. The paperwork, the background checks, the uncertainty? Tom's eyes met hers, steady and sure, especially with all of that. Those kids in there, they're worth fighting for. And you, he squeezed her hand. We lost 11 years, Eva. I don't want to lose another day. From the living room came the soft sounds of children breathing, peaceful in sleep. Eva stood and walked to the doorway, Tom following. They stood together, watching Noah and Gracie sleeping side by side on the couch, the fair prizes scattered. Around them, Noah's penguin still firmly in his grasp. Look at them, Eva whispered, leaning back against Tom's chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, solid and secure. They already look like siblings. They already act like siblings. Tom chuckled softly, remembering how they'd shared their cotton candy without being asked, how Gracie had helped Noah aim at the balloon darts, how Noah had given her his prize ticket so she could get a bigger stuffed animal. Today was perfect, Eva said, turning in his arms to face him. This is what I've dreamed of all these years, not just finding you again, but creating something beautiful together. A real family. The morning sun had barely risen over the city courthouse when Tom's garbage truck rumbled to a stop in the parking lot. He'd worked an early shift to make it to Noah's hearing on time, and the familiar scent of coffee lingered in his thermos. His work uniform was neatly pressed, the best he could manage for court, and his usually messy silver hair was combed back. Eva's blue sedan pulled in beside him, Gracie bouncing in the back seat while Noah sat quietly next to her, his hands folded in his lap. Tom's heart swelled at the sight of them, his family. The words still felt new and precious, like a delicate bird he was afraid might fly away. Dad! Gracie called out, practically tumbling from the car in her rush to hug him. Her plaid school jumper was slightly wrinkled, and her dark braids swung as she moved. You smell like garbage truck. Tom chuckled, ruffling her hair. Sorry, princess. Didn't have time to change yet. Eva stepped out, looking professional in her navy blazer and pencil skirt. Her gentle smile made his chest tighten with emotion. Noah followed more slowly, wearing the new sweater they'd bought him last weekend. His face was serious, but his eyes held a glimmer of hope that hadn't been there weeks ago. Ready for this? Eva asked, reaching for Tom's hand. Before he could answer, 2 police cruisers pulled up, their tires crunching on the gravel. Officer Martinez stepped out, his face grim. Tom's stomach dropped. He knew that look from his military days. Something was wrong. Thomas Rourke? A different officer approached, his badge catching the morning light. I need you to put your hands where I can see them. Gracie grabbed Tom's leg. Daddy? It's okay, sweetheart, Tom said softly, though his heart was hammering. He gently disconnected from her grip and raised his hands. What seems to be the problem, officer? There's an outstanding warrant for your arrest from 2015. Assault and battery at the Red Horse Tavern. You never appeared in court. The memory hit Tom like a punch to the gut. The bar fight. It had happened during his darkest days, before Gracie came into his life. He'd thought it was resolved. He'd paid restitution to the bar owner. But court appearance? His alcohol-soaked memories of that time were fragmented at best. There must be some mistake. Eva stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. We have a hearing this morning. It's about his son. Mom? Noah's quiet voice cracked. He'd pressed himself against the car, his face pale. Tom's heart broke seeing the fear in the boy's eyes, the same fear he'd worn at their first meeting. Please. Tom kept his voice calm, even as the officer moved to cuff him. Let me explain to the kids. The officer hesitated, then nodded. Tom knelt down, his hands still visible. Gracie, Noah, I have to go with these officers for a little while. There was a mistake from a long time ago that I need to fix. No. Gracie's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. You can't go. We have to go to court. We have to make Noah our family. Sir, Officer Martinez interjected. I can vouch for Tom. He's not a flight risk. Maybe we could... I'm sorry, the arresting officer said, and he did sound genuinely apologetic. The warrant's active. We have to take him." The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around Tom's wrists. The sound seemed to echo in the quiet morning air. Noah had started trembling, and Eva wrapped an arm around both children, pulling them close. "Eva," Tom's voice was rough with emotion. "Call Mrs. Lavelle. She can watch the kids. And call the court. Explain what happened. Maybe they can postpone." "Step toward the vehicle, Mr. Rourke," the officer directed. Tom took one last look at his family. Eva's face was a mask of shock, but her eyes held determination. Gracie was sobbing into Eva's skirt. And Noah's expression hit him hardest of all. It was the look of someone who'd expected this all along, who'd been waiting for everything to fall apart. "I love you," Tom said firmly, making sure to meet each of their eyes. "This will be okay, I promise." The officer guided him into the back of the cruiser. Through the window, Tom watched Eva gather the children close, her lips moving in what he hoped were words of comfort. He saw Mrs. Martinez hurrying over from her car, where she'd been waiting to attend the hearing. The group huddled together, a family fractured but not broken. As the cruiser pulled away, Tom closed his eyes against the burning tears. All his fears about not being good enough, about his past coming back to haunt him, they'd just come true in the worst possible way. The thought of Noah retreating back into his shell, of Gracie's trust being shaken, of Eva having to handle everything alone, it was almost unbearable. The courthouse shrank in the rearview mirror, taking with it all their careful plans for the morning. Tom's work clothes felt scratchy against his skin, and the handcuffs bit into his wrists. But worse than any physical discomfort was the memory of his children's faces, one devastated, one resigned, both hurt by his past mistakes. "I should have known," he whispered to himself, watching the city streets blur past. "Should have checked everything. Should have been better." The police radio crackled with codes and voices, but Tom barely heard them. His mind was back in the courthouse parking lot with his family. With the life he'd been building, now balanced on a knife's edge because of one forgotten court date from his darkest days. The cruiser turned onto the main road, heading toward the police station. Tom straightened his shoulders as much as the handcuffs would allow. He'd fought his way back from rock bottom before. He'd do it again. For Eva, for Gracie, for Noah, for the family they were meant to be. Eva's hands trembled as she dialed Officer Martinez's number. She paced back and forth in front of the courthouse, her heart racing while she waited for him to pick up. Gracie sat on a nearby bench, tears streaming down her face, clutching the gold locket Eva had given her. "Martinez," the familiar voice answered. "Officer Martinez, it's Eva Bennett. They just arrested Tom right in front of the courthouse. Something about an old bar fight case." Her voice cracked. "Please, we need your help." There was a pause on the line. "Where's Gracie?" "She's with me." "We were all supposed to be at the hearing for Noah." Eva swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure for Gracie's sake. "Stay where you are. I'm calling legal aid and heading your way." Within 20 minutes, Officer Martinez's patrol car pulled up. He stepped out, his weathered face set with determination. "Mrs. Lavelle arrived moments later in her ancient station wagon, having received Eva's text. "This is nonsense," Mrs. Lavelle declared, wrapping her arms around a still-crying Gracie. "Tom hasn't touched a drop in 9 years. That man works harder than anyone I know." Officer Martinez nodded grimly. "The system sometimes has a long memory but a short sight. Let me make some calls." They gathered in the courthouse cafe, where Martinez spread out his phone and notebook. Eva sat with Gracie, who had finally stopped crying but remained unusually quiet. Mrs. Lavelle disappeared briefly, returning with a legal pad and a fierce look in her eyes. "I'm starting a petition," she announced, her pen already scratching across the paper. "This town knows Tom. They know what he's done for the community." Eva watched as Mrs. Lavelle began writing with surprising speed. "We, the undersigned residents of Pine Grove, attest to the character and contribution of Thomas Rourke." Officer Martinez hung up his phone. "Legal aid's sending Sarah Chen. She's handled veterans' cases before. She'll meet us here in an hour." Eva nodded, her throat tight. "What about Noah? The hearing?" "I called the social worker," Martinez assured her. "They're postponing it, given the circumstances. But Eva, we need to move fast on this." Mrs. Lavelle was already on her phone, her voice carrying across the cafe. "Betty, get the church phone tree going. Tom Rourke needs our help." "Yes, that Tom, the one who's been fixing the playground equipment for free, the one who saved Eva Bennett." Throughout the morning, people began trickling into the courthouse cafe. Betty from the church arrived with 3 pages of signatures. The owner of the convenience store where Tom had saved Eva brought security camera footage from that day. Even Tom's supervisor from the sanitation department showed up, carrying Tom's spotless employment record. Sarah Chin arrived precisely on time, her briefcase bulging with files. She listened intently as Officer Martinez explained the situation. The original charge was from 11 years ago, Chen said, reviewing the documents. Tom completed most of the requirements, but there was a paperwork gap during his recovery period. It should have been cleared up then. This is exactly the kind of thing that falls through the cracks, especially with veterans. Eva leaned forward. Can we fix it? With all this community support, absolutely. But first, let's go see Tom. The county jail was a gray, imposing building that made Eva's stomach clench. After surrendering their phones and going through security, they were led to the visiting area. Tom sat on the other side of the glass, still in his work uniform, looking exhausted but clear-eyed. Eva's heart ached seeing him there. She picked up the phone, pressing her hand against the glass. "We're fighting this, Tom. The whole town is behind you." Tom's voice was rough through the receiver. "You shouldn't waste your time on me, Eva. Maybe this is what I deserve for." "Don't you dare," Eva cut him off, her voice fierce. "Don't you dare give up now. Noah needs you. Gracie needs you." She paused, gathering courage. "I need you." She saw the emotion flash across his face before he looked down, blinking hard. "Miss Ooze, Lavelle has half the town signing a petition," Eva continued. "Officer Martinez brought in a lawyer who specializes in veterans' cases. Your boss brought your work records. Everyone remembers how you saved me, how you mentored those boys at the community." Tom looked up, his eyes wet. "Gracie? She's with Mrs. Lavelle. She's scared, but she's strong, just like her father." Eva managed a small smile. "We're going to fix this, Tom. Together." "I don't deserve all this help," Tom whispered. "You do," Eva insisted. "You deserve this and more. You're not that man from 11 years ago. You're the man who gets up at dawn to keep our streets clean. You're the man who saved me without hesitation. You're the man our children need." Sarah Chin joined them then, explaining the legal strategy. The old charge could be resolved with the right documentation and character witnesses. They would file for an emergency hearing given the circumstances with Noah's case. "Mr. Rourke," Chen said, "your story, veteran, recovery, single father, community service, this is exactly the kind of case judges look at favorably, especially with this kind of community support." When their visiting time ended, Eva stood reluctantly. "I'll be back tomorrow," she promised. "And the day after that, if needed. We're not giving up on you, Tom." Back outside, Eva found Mrs. Lavelle waiting with Gracie. The older woman's legal pad now had pages of signatures attached. The hardware store owner signed. Mrs. Lavelle reported. Said Tom helped his son get into a trade program. The librarian, too, apparently. Tom's been volunteering to read to kids on Saturday mornings. She smiled proudly. This town knows a good man when they see one. Eva hugged Gracie close, feeling the girl's arms wrapped tightly around her waist. "Your dad's going to be okay," she whispered. "We're all going to make sure of it." Officer Martinez approached, his phone in hand. "Just got word from the court clerk. We've got a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Judge Matthews, she's fair, knows the system's flaws when it comes to veterans." Eva nodded, hope rising in her chest. They had work to do, but they weren't doing it alone. All around them, the town was rallying, proving that sometimes the smallest communities had the biggest hearts. As they left the courthouse, Eva looked back at the imposing building. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, she held on to the image of Tom's face when she'd promised not to give up. Some battles were worth fighting, and this one, for family, for love, for second chances, this one they would fight together. The metal chair scraped against the concrete floor as Tom sat down in the jail's visiting room. Officer Martinez settled across from him, his weathered face etched with concern. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows in the stark space. "Tell me everything, Tom," Martinez said quietly. From the beginning. Tom's shoulders slumped as he stared at his calloused hands resting on the metal table. The weight of his past pressed down on him like a physical thing. "It was my last deployment," Tom began, his voice rough. "I was a staff sergeant then. There was this kid in my unit. Couldn't have been more than 19. Private Jenkins." He paused, swallowing hard. "Found him one night behind the barracks. Our lieutenant had him cornered. Martinez leaned forward, his expression grave. What happened? The lieutenant was drunk, trying to. Tom's jaw clenched. Jenkins was just a kid. I pulled the lieutenant off him, but he came at me. We fought. I broke his jaw. He rubbed his face with both hands. They believed his story over mine. Jenkins was too scared to speak up. Can't blame him. That's what led to the discharge? Tom nodded. Dishonorable. Lost everything I'd worked for. Came home, started drinking. Then, that night at Murphy's bar, he shook his head. Same thing. Saw some guy roughing up his girlfriend. Stepped in. He pulled a knife. I defended myself. Next thing I knew, cops were there. I was drunk, angry, ran before they could process me. Martinez pulled out a small notebook, writing quickly. The assault charge was never properly resolved because you left town. I was a mess back then, Tom admitted. Kept moving, drinking, until Gracie's mom left her with me. Having that little girl. His voice cracked. She saved my life, Miguel. Got sober, found steady work. Been clean almost 10 years now. The old officer's pen moved across the paper. This changes things, Tom. The original incident. You were protecting someone. And the bar fight was self-defense. He looked up. We can work with this. I'll testify about your character, what you did for Eva. The whole town's behind you. A guard appeared with an envelope. Mail for Rourke. Tom accepted it with trembling hands, recognizing Gracie's messy handwriting. He carefully opened it, unfolding a sheet of notebook paper covered in purple ink. Dear Daddy, he read aloud, his voice thick with emotion. Mrs. Lavelle is helping me write this letter. I want you to know that you're already the best dad. Noah and I both need you. He had to stop, pressing his fist against his mouth. Martinez waited patiently while Tom collected himself. She drew pictures? Tom continued after a moment, spreading the paper on the table. There were crayon drawings of 4 stick figures holding hands. Tom, Eva, Gracie, and Noah. Hearts floated above their heads. I visited Noah at his foster home yesterday, Tom said quietly. He was so confused, asking where Mr. Tom was. That kid's been through enough already, and now Gracie. He shook his head, blinking hard. Martinez reached across the table, gripping Tom's shoulder. Listen to me. You're not the same man you were 11 years ago. You've built a good life, helped people, raised a wonderful daughter. That counts for something. The lawyer Eva found, she thinks she can help? Sarah Peterson? She's good, knows her stuff. She's already filing motions to get the old charges properly addressed. Martinez tapped his notebook. With my testimony about the recent incident with Eva, your clean record since getting sober, character witnesses from the community. We've got a solid case. Tom stared at Gracie's letter, at the careful way she'd drawn their family together. I can't lose them, Miguel. Any of them. You won't, Martinez said firmly. The truth counts for something in this town. People know who you are now. The man who stops to help Mrs. Chin with her garbage bins, who fixed the Williams kid's bike, who ran into that alley to save Eva without a second thought. He smiled slightly. The same man who threw himself between others and harm, even when it cost him everything. Tom's hands shook as he carefully folded Gracie's letter. I just want to be worthy of them. You already are. Martinez stood up. I'm heading to meet with Sarah now. We'll get you out of here, Tom. Hold on to that letter. Remember what you're fighting for. As Martinez turned to leave, Tom called after him. Miguel, thank you for believing in me. The old officer nodded. You believed in yourself enough to change your life once before. Time to do it again. He tapped the cell bars. Keep your head up. Your family needs you. Tom watched him go, then unfolded Gracie's letter again. He traced the stick figures with his finger, remembering Noah's shy smile at the fair, Gracie's fierce hugs, Eva's soft kiss. His chest ached with missing them. A guard passed by, pausing at his cell. Lights out in 10, Rourke. Tom carefully tucked the letter into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. In the growing darkness, he closed his eyes and pictured his family, the one he had and the one he could have. For them, he would fight. For them, he would face his past and find a way forward. Because Gracie was right, they needed him. And for the first time in a very long time, Tom allowed himself to believe he needed them too. The county courthouse loomed before them, its red brick facade catching the morning sun. Eva smoothed her navy blazer with trembling hands as she climbed the wide stone steps. Behind her, Mrs. Lavelle guided Gracie, who clutched her backpack tight against her chest. A small crowd of supporters had gathered, garbage collectors in their work uniforms, parents from Gracie's school, and several veterans who knew Tom from his volunteer work at the community center. Inside the courtroom, the polished wooden benches creaked as people settled in. The air felt thick with anticipation. Tom sat at the defendant's table in his best shirt, the white one Gracie had helped iron the night before his arrest. His shoulders were straight, but his hands fidgeted beneath the table. Judge Eleanor Matthews adjusted her glasses, scanning the documents before her. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back severely, but there was kindness in the lines around her eyes. "The court will now hear testimony regarding the case of Thomas Rourke," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "Miss Bennett, please approach." Eva rose slowly, her heels clicking against the floor as she made her way to the witness stand. After being sworn in, she took a deep breath and looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," Eva began, her voice growing stronger with each word. 11 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything when Tom disappeared from my life. But fate brought him back in the most extraordinary way. He saved me from an attack without even knowing who I was. That's who Tom Rourke is. He helps people without hesitation, without seeking recognition. She turned slightly, meeting Tom's eyes. Since reconnecting, I've watched him with his daughter Gracie. I've seen him mentor troubled teens at the community center. I've witnessed him work double shifts to help a coworker whose wife was sick. The man before you today isn't just reformed, he's transformed himself into someone who makes this community better every single day. Eva's voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. When we discovered he was Noah's father, Tom's first concern wasn't for Abba himself. It was for what would be best for our son. He spent every moment since then trying to prove himself worthy of being in Noah's life, even though he already is. The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Miss Bennett. Officer Martinez, please take the stand." Martinez walked to the front, his police uniform pressed and medals gleaming. He placed his hand on the Bible and took the oath, then settled into the chair with the confidence of someone who testified hundreds of times before. "Your Honor," he began, pulling out a worn folder. "I've spent the last week investigating the original incident that led to Mr. Rourke's dishonorable discharge and subsequent civilian altercation. What I discovered was disturbing." He held up several documents. "I have here sworn statements from 3 witnesses who were present that night, including the young recruit Mr. Rourke defended. They all corroborate that Staff Sergeant James Miller was attempting to assault Private David Chin when Mr. Rourke intervened." The judge leaned forward. "And these statements weren't presented at the original hearing?" "No, Your Honor. Staff Sergeant Miller had threatened the witnesses with retaliation if they came forward. He had a history of similar incidents that were covered up. The subsequent bar fight occurred when Miller confronted Mr. Rourke in civilian life, attempting to silence him about the original incident." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge raised her hand for silence. "I have reviewed these documents thoroughly," Judge Matthews declared, removing her glasses. "What I see here is not just a miscarriage of justice in the military system, but a ripple effect that has haunted Mr. Rourke for over a decade." She turned her gaze directly to Tom. "Mr. Rourke, please stand." Tom rose slowly, his face calm, but his eyes intense. "This court finds that the original charges were fundamentally flawed and based on deliberately misleading evidence. Furthermore, your actions since then, your recovery, your dedication to your daughter, your service to this community, speak to a man of character and principle." She lifted her gavel. "All charges are hereby dismissed." The crack of the gavel was nearly drowned out by the eruption of cheers from the gallery. Tom's shoulders sagged with relief as his lawyer patted his back, but his eyes searched the crowd for only one person. "Daddy." Gracie's voice cut through the noise as she broke away from Mrs. Lavelle, darting past the gallery gate. Her feet barely seemed to touch the ground as she ran toward him. Tom knelt down, opening his arms wide just as Gracie crashed into him. He lifted her up, holding her tight as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Her tears dampened his collar, but he could feel her smiling against his shoulder. "You're home now?" she whispered into his ear. "I'm home, sweetheart," he assured her, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere." The crowd had gathered around them. Now, Eva wiping tears from her cheeks, Officer Martinez beaming proudly, "Mrs. Lavelle clutching her handkerchief, and dozens of community members who had come to support the man who had quietly supported them for years. Tom kept holding Gracie with one arm as he reached out to squeeze Eva's hand. The morning sunlight streamed through the high courthouse windows, warming the scene with golden light. In that moment, surrounded by love and vindication, Tom Rourke finally felt the weight of his past beginning to lift. The small moving truck rumbled down Cedar Street on a crisp Saturday morning. Tom followed behind in his pickup, glancing in the rearview mirror at Eva's car where Gracie and Noah sat together in the back seat, their heads bent over a comic book. His heart swelled at the sight. The rental house wasn't fancy, just a modest two-story with faded yellow siding and white trim that needed touching up. But it had a wide front porch, a maple tree perfect for climbing, and, most importantly, it was only 3 blocks from the kids' school. Tom pulled into the gravel driveway, and the familiar scent of freshly cut grass filled the air. "This is really our house?" Noah asked quietly as he stepped out of Eva's car. His eyes were wide as he took in the weathered swing hanging from the porch rafters. "Sure is, buddy." Tom placed a gentle hand on Noah's shoulder. The boy didn't flinch away anymore, a small victory that meant everything. Gracie burst from the car like a firecracker, her ponytail bouncing. "Can I pick my room first? Please, Dad?" "Hold on there, sunshine." Eva laughed, pulling a box marked kitchen from the trunk. "Let's get everything inside first. Then we can figure out the rooms together." They formed a human chain, passing boxes from the truck to the house. Noah, usually so reserved, surprised them by taking charge of directing where each box should go based on its label. He had a knack for organization that made Eva smile. He got that from her. "These go upstairs," Noah said decisively, pointing to a stack of boxes marked bedding. His voice carried a hint of excitement he couldn't quite hide. The afternoon passed in a blur of cardboard boxes, bubble wrap, and furniture arranging. Tom and Eva assembled beds while the kids unpacked their treasures. The house slowly transformed from empty rooms to lived-in spaces filled with their combined belongings. In the kitchen, Eva hung the copper pots she'd inherited from her grandmother above the stove. Tom watched her stretch to reach the hooks, remembering how she used to cook for him during their brief time together years ago. Now, here they were, building a home. "Need help with those?" he asked, stepping closer. "I've got it." She smiled, but he stayed nearby anyway, just in case. Upstairs, Gracie had claimed the bedroom with the bay window overlooking the backyard. She was already arranging her stuffed animals on the window seat when Noah appeared in the doorway, clutching his sketchbook. "Want to help me decorate?" she asked, patting the spot next to her. Noah hesitated only a moment before joining his sister. The word felt right, even if it wasn't official yet. Tom found them later, surrounded by Gracie's art supplies, making welcome signs for their doors. Noah's detailed drawings showed the house, with all 4 of them standing out front, holding hands. The sight made Tom's throat tight. In the master bedroom, Eva unpacked photos, some old, some new. There was one of Tom and Gracie at her school play, another of Noah's first day with them at the park, and a recent snapshot of all 4 of them at the ice cream parlor downtown. She arranged them carefully on the dresser, each frame a piece of their story. "Found a spot for this?" Tom said, entering with a worn wooden box under his arm. It was his father's old toolbox, refinished and repurposed to hold Eva's jewelry. "It's perfect." She ran her fingers over the smooth surface, just like everything else today. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows as they ordered pizza for dinner, a moving day tradition. They sat cross-legged on the living room floor, paper plates balanced on their laps, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and possibility. "Can we hang my science fair ribbon in my room?" Noah asked between bites, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Of course we can, honey." Eva beamed at him. "We'll get some proper picture hooks tomorrow." "And my soccer trophies?" Gracie chimed in, pizza sauce dotting her chin. "You bet, princess." Tom handed her a napkin. "We'll make sure everything finds its place." After dinner, Tom and Eva tucked both kids into their new beds. Gracie's room was already a rainbow explosion of stuffed animals and books, while Noah's remained neater, his few possessions arranged with careful precision on the shelf by his bed. "Good night, my loves," Eva said, kissing each child's forehead. The words felt natural, right? Like she'd been saying them forever. Back downstairs, Tom and Eva collapsed onto the second-hand couch they'd bought last week. The springs creaked slightly, but neither minded. Eva curled into Tom's side, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Listen," he whispered. "To what?" "The house settling, the kids breathing upstairs, all of it. He pressed a kiss to her temple. This is what home sounds like. Eva closed her eyes, taking in the peaceful quiet broken only by the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of crickets through the screen door they'd left open to catch the evening breeze. I never thought I'd have this again, she admitted softly. A real family. Tom pulled her closer. Me neither. But here we are. They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked and walls yet to be decorated. But it didn't matter that everything wasn't perfect yet. They had time, all the time in the world to make this house into their home, one day at Arounges. Time. Tomorrow they would hang pictures and arrange furniture. They would plant flowers in the window boxes and maybe start planting a vegetable garden in the backyard. But for now, they simply sat together, listening to their children sleep peacefully above them, feeling the rightness of finally being where they belonged. Together, under one roof, their past hurts healing in the warmth of their present joy. The temporary guardianship papers for Noah sat on the kitchen counter, official and promising. They were just another stepping stone on the path to becoming the family they were always meant to be. In this moment, in this house that already felt like home, they had everything they needed, each other, and the love that had brought them back together against all odds. The community center's fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead as Tom arranged metal folding chairs in a circle. His hands trembled slightly as he placed the last chair, but his movements were purposeful. The empty room would soon hold stories of war, loss, and hopefully healing. Need any help there? Officer Martinez stood in the doorway, 2 cardboard coffee carriers in his hands. Tom managed a small smile. Thanks for coming early, and for the coffee. Wouldn't miss it. First meeting's always the hardest. Martinez set the coffee on a small table near the entrance. How many are we expecting? 6, confirmed. Maybe more. Tom straightened a chair that was slightly out of alignment. Some guys from my old unit, couple others from the VA support network. The door creaked open again, and 3 men walked in, faces weathered, postures guarded. Tom recognized the look in their eyes. He'd seen it in his own mirror for years. They nodded in greeting, gravitating toward the coffee. As more veterans filtered in, Tom felt his anxiety ease. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about creating a safe space, the kind he wished he'd had years ago. Across town, at the women's shelter, Eva stood before the board of directors, her presentation materials spread neatly on the conference table. The outreach program has shown remarkable success in its first month, she explained, pointing to a graph. We've helped 37 women secure temporary housing and connected 15 with job training programs. The shelter's director, Mrs. Harrison, nodded approvingly. The numbers speak for themselves, Eva. The board agrees. We'd like you to take on the role of program director permanently. Eva's breath caught. I'm honored, but no buts, Mrs. Harrison said firmly. You've proven yourself more than capable. Besides, who better to lead than someone who understands both sides of the system? Eva thought of Noah, of all the children still in foster care. Thank you. I accept. In Dr. Sarah Chin's office, Noah sat cross-legged on a comfortable beanbag chair, sketching in his notebook. The child psychologist watched him work, her expression gentle. Can you tell me about your drawing, Noah? He held up the paper. It showed 4 stick figures standing in front of a house, 2 tall, 2 shorter. That's Tom and Eva, he pointed. And that's Gracie, and me. They look happy, Dr. Chin observed. Noah nodded slowly. Gracie showed me how to make the smiles bigger. She says happy faces need big smiles. You and Gracie seem to spend a lot of time together. She helps me remember stuff, Noah said, adding clouds to his picture. Like where the cups are in the kitchen, or which remote is for the TV. And she always saves me a spot at lunch at school. That sounds nice. Yesterday, she told Jenny Martinez I was her brother. Noah's hand paused over the paper. She didn't even hesitate or anything. Dr. Chin leaned forward slightly. How did that make you feel? Noah was quiet for a long moment. Good. He finally whispered, really good. Evening settled over the yellow house on Cedar Street. Tom sat on the edge of Noah's bed, a worn copy of Bridge 2, Terabithia, open in his hands. Both children were tucked under their covers, Noah in his bed, Gracie in the sleeping bag. She'd insisted on bringing 2 her sleepover in Noah's room. Just hold on tight and keep your mind wide open, Tom read, his voice soft and steady. He glanced up to see both children hanging on every word. When the chapter ended, Gracie yawned dramatically. "One more chapter, Dad, please?" Tom smiled but shook his head. "School tomorrow. Sunshine? Time for sleep." He marked their place with a bookmark Gracie had made. Popsicle sticks glued together and decorated with glitter that still somehow ended up everywhere. Standing, he tucked Noah's blanket more securely around him. "Goodnight, Dad," Noah mumbled, then froze, his eyes going wide. Tom's heart skipped, then filled with warmth. He smoothed Noah's hair back from his forehead. "Good night, son." The word felt right, natural. "Night, Dad," Gracie chimed in. "Night, brother. Night, sister," Noah whispered. Back, a small smile playing on his lips. Tom turned on the nightlight, a constellation projector that filled the ceiling with stars, and stepped into the hallway. He found Eva there, leaning against the wall, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "How long were you listening?" he asked softly. "Long enough." She slipped her hand into his. Through the partially open door, they could hear Gracie and Noah whispering and giggling quietly. Tom squeezed Eva's hand. "Should we tell them to settle down?" Eva shook her head, smiling. "Let them be. That's what siblings do." They stood there for a moment longer, listening to the sound of their children, their family, finding their way to belonging, one whispered joke and shared secret at a time. Tom thought about the veterans at the support group, about Eva's work at the shelter, about Noah's careful progress in therapy. They were all healing, all growing, all learning to trust in second chances and new beginnings. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but they would walk it together. The whispers from Noah's room gradually quieted, replaced by the steady breathing of sleeping children. Tom and Eva moved away from the door, their footsteps soft on the carpeted hallway. In the kitchen, Eva started making tea while Tom pulled out his journal, a habit Dr. Chin had suggested he share with Noah. Tonight's entry would be simple but significant. "Today, Noah called me Dad." Tom's garbage route started like any other Tuesday morning. The autumn air had a crisp bite to it as he maneuvered his truck through the quiet streets of the neighborhood. His mind wandered to Eva and the kids, already picturing Noah's shy smile at breakfast and Gracie's animated chatter about her science project. When he pulled up to the post office for their regular pickup, Martha, the elderly postal clerk, waved him down. Her gray curls bounced as she hurried out with a weathered cardboard box in her arms. "Tom, thank goodness you're here," she called out. They found this in an old military post office during renovations. It's been sitting in storage for years. Tom climbed down from his truck, his work boots crunching on the gravel. The box was covered in faded stamps and multiple return to sender notices. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Eva's maiden name and her old address on the yellowed labels. "These are all letters that never made it to you," Martha explained softly. The military postal service had some issues back then. They'd been trying to track down the intended recipients. Tom's hands shook as he accepted the package. "Thank you, Martha," he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. The box sat in his passenger seat like a time bomb, both precious and terrifying. When his route was finally done, Tom didn't head straight home. Instead, he drove to the lake where he often went to think. Parking under a towering oak tree, he opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside were dozens of letters, each one carefully addressed in Eva's neat handwriting. The postmarks spanned several months after he'd been suddenly reassigned overseas. Tom picked up the first envelope, dated just 2 weeks after he'd left. The paper was thin and delicate with age. He opened it carefully, trying not to tear the fragile edges. "Dear Tom," he read, his vision blurring. "I don't know if you'll get this letter, but I have to try. There's something important I need to tell you." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lake, Tom read letter after letter. Each one revealed another piece of their lost history. Eva's discovery of her pregnancy, her desperate attempts to reach him, her parents' pressure to give up the baby, her heartbreak and loneliness. Tears fell freely down his weathered cheeks as he read about Noah's birth. Eva had described their son in careful detail, his tiny fingers, his dark hair, how he had Tom's eyes. She'd begged Tom to come home, to help her fight for their child. "I know in my heart you wouldn't abandon us if you knew," one letter read. "You're a good man, Tom Rourke, even if you don't always believe it yourself." The final letter was shorter than the others, its tone resigned and heartbroken. "They won't let me keep him," Eva had written. "I'm so sorry, Tom. I tried to be strong enough for both of us, but I failed. I hope someday you'll understand and forgive me." Tom sat in his truck until well after dark, reading and rereading the letters until his eyes burned. Each word was a punch to his gut, each tear-stained page a reminder of how much they'd both lost. When he finally drove home, the house was quiet. Through the window, he could see Eva in the kitchen, preparing lunchboxes for tomorrow. The sight of her so natural in their shared home, so perfect with their children, made his chest ache with love and regret. He gathered the letters carefully, holding them close as he walked to the door. The familiar creak of the screen door made Eva look up. Her smile faded when she saw his red-rimmed eyes and the bundle in his arms. "Tom?" she asked softly, setting down the sandwich she was making. "What's wrong?" He tried to speak but couldn't find the words. Instead, he placed the stack of letters gently on the kitchen counter between them. Eva's hand flew to her mouth as she recognized her own handwriting. "They found them?" Tom managed to say, his voice hoarse. "At the old military post office. All your letters. Eva, I'm so sorry. If I had known." Eva picked up the first letter with shaking hands, tears already welling in her eyes. "I wrote these every day for months," she whispered. I thought you were getting them and choosing not to respond." Tom moved around the counter and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, clutching the letters between them. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding each other as years of pain and misunderstanding finally began to heal. "I would have come back," Tom murmured into her hair. "I would have fought the whole world to keep you both." Eva nodded against his chest, unable to speak through her tears. Together, they sank down onto the kitchen floor, backs against the cabinets, shoulders touching. The letters lay scattered around them like fallen leaves, each one a testament to their lost time and newfound chance at happiness. They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped together, surrounded by the physical remnants of their past. Through the wall, they could hear Noah's soft snoring from his new bedroom, and the occasional creak of Gracie's bed as she turned in her sleep. Their children were safe, together under one roof, just as they should have been all along. Minutes stretched into hours as they held each other, no words needed to express the depth of their emotions. The kitchen clock ticked softly, marking time in this peaceful moment of healing and understanding. Tom's thumb traced gentle circles on Eva's hand while she rested her head on his shoulder, occasionally reaching out to touch one of the letters, as if making sure they were real. In the gentle quiet of their kitchen, surrounded by words written so long ago, Tom and Eva found another piece of their hearts clicking into place. The letters, though years too late in arriving, had finally delivered their message of love, hope, and unbreakable connection. The county courthouse loomed over them, its stone facade catching the morning light. Tom adjusted his tie for the 100th time as they walked up the wide steps. His hands trembled slightly, but Eva's steady presence beside him kept him grounded. "You've got this," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "We've got this." Noah walked between them, wearing the new blue sweater they'd bought him for the occasion. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his eyes darted nervously around the building as they entered. Gracie skipped ahead, her patent leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. Mrs. Lavelle had insisted on coming too, along with Officer Martinez. They followed behind, their footsteps echoing in the high-ceilinged hallway. The old woman carried a thick folder of character references from neighbors and community members. Courtroom 3. Eva read from the paper in her hand. Her voice was calm, but Tom could see the tension in her shoulders. They found their seats in the wooden benches. Their lawyer, Sarah Chen, was already there, arranging papers on the table. She gave them a reassuring smile and motioned them forward. "Everything's in order," she said quietly. The home study came back perfect, and Noah's current foster family has given their full support for the transition. Tom nodded, unable to find his voice. He felt Noah's small hand slip into his and looked down to see the boy's serious face turned up toward him. "It's gonna be okay, right?" Noah asked in a whisper. "Yeah, buddy, it's gonna be okay." Tom's voice was rough with emotion. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Wilson entered. She was a tall woman with kind eyes behind her glasses. Tom had met her briefly during the previous hearing about his old charges, and she'd shown understanding then. The proceedings began with Sarah presenting their petition. She outlined Tom and Eva's journey, their commitment to Noah's well-being, and the strong bonds already formed between all family members. The social worker testified about their home visits and Noah's obvious attachment to both Tom and Eva. "Noah has shown remarkable progress since beginning regular visits with the Rourkes," she explained. His grades have improved, and his therapist reports significant positive changes in his emotional well-being. Judge Wilson listened intently, occasionally making notes. When it was time for character witnesses, Mrs. Lavelle spoke first, her voice wavering but clear. "I've watched Tom raise Gracie for years. Now," she said, "that man would move mountains for his children, and Eva, she's brought such light into their lives. Noah deserves to be with them." Officer Martinez spoke about Tom's integrity and service to the community. "He's the kind of man who runs toward danger to help others," he said. "That's the kind of father Noah needs." Finally, the judge asked Noah to approach the bench. Tom's heart clenched as the boy walked forward, looking so small in the large courtroom. "Noah," Judge Wilson said gently, "I'd like to hear from you. How do you feel about Mr. Rourke and Mrs. Nade Bennett becoming your legal guardians?" Noah glanced back at Tom and Eva, then stood a little straighter. "They make me feel safe," he said softly, "and loved. Gracie's like the sister I always wanted. And Tom, he helps me with my nightmares, just sits with me until I'm not scared anymore. Eva knows exactly what to say when I'm sad about my adopted parents. They feel like home." Tom felt tears rolling down his cheeks. Eva gripped his hand tightly, her own eyes glistening. Judge Wilson smiled warmly. "Thank you, Noah. You may return to your seat." She looked over the paperwork one final time, then set down her pen. "Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, I find it in the best interest of the minor child to grant full legal guardianship to Thomas Rourke and Eva Bennett." She smiled. "Congratulations to your family." Noah's face lit up with pure joy. He turned to the judge and, in a moment of spontaneous emotion, hugged her around the waist. The courtroom erupted in soft laughter as Judge Wilson patted his back, clearly touched by the gesture. They gathered their things in a daze of happiness, accepting congratulations from their lawyer and the social worker, Mrs. Lavelle was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and Officer Martinez gave Tom a hearty clap on the shoulder. The morning sun was bright as they emerged onto the courthouse steps. Tom felt lighter than he had in years, as if a weight he'd carried for so long had finally lifted. Eva's eyes shone with tears of joy as she watched Noah and Gracie chattering excitedly about decorating Noah's room. Noah suddenly turned and looked up at Tom, his expression serious but full of love. "Dad," he said, testing the word carefully, "can we get ice cream to celebrate?" Tom's heart seemed to stop for a moment, then swelled with so much emotion he could barely breathe. It was the first time Noah had called him Dad. He pulled the boy into a tight hug, not caring about the tears that fell into Noah's dark hair. "Yeah, son," he managed to say, "we can definitely get ice cream." Gracie watched the scene unfold, then slipped her small hand into Eva's. Her voice was full of contentment as she said, "Now we're all together." Eva wrapped her arm around the little girl's shoulders, pulling her close. The morning sun caught the gold locket around Gracie's neck, the one Eva had given her at the recital, making it shine like a promise kept. Mrs. Lavelle and Officer Martinez said their goodbyes, leaving the new family standing together on the courthouse steps. Tom looked at Eva, at the children who were now officially theirs, to protect and love, and felt complete in a way he never thought possible. Noah's hand was still in his. Gracie was beaming at them all, and Eva's eyes held all the love and hope he'd ever dreamed of. They were no longer broken pieces trying to fit together. They were whole. They were family. They were home. Snow drifted lazily past the windows of their small rental house on Maple Street. Inside, warmth and laughter filled every corner as Tom helped Noah stretch to place another construction paper chain on their modest Christmas tree. "A little higher, Dad?" Noah said, the word Dad still new and wonderful on his tongue. Tom lifted him up, and the 11-year-old carefully draped the red and green paper chain across a branch. Eva stood in the kitchen doorway, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron, taking in the sight of them. The scent of roasting turkey and fresh-baked cookies wrapped around them like a warm embrace. Gracie sat cross-legged on the floor, tongue poking out in concentration as she threaded popcorn onto a string. "Miss Sunshine," Gracie called out, using the nickname that had stuck even after all these months, "can you help me with this part? It keeps breaking." Eva settled beside her on the carpet, showing her how to guide the needle through the popcorn more gently. "Like this, sweetheart. Nice and easy." Their tree wasn't store-bought perfect. Instead, it was decorated with paper stars covered in glitter, painted pine cones, and strings of popcorn and cranberries. Each handmade ornament told a story of their first Christmas together as a family. Remember when we made these at the kitchen table? Noah held up a salt dough ornament shaped like a star, painted in wobbly blue stripes. That was the night you got flour all over your sister's hair, Tom chuckled, ruffling Noah's dark curls. And she got me back by putting glitter in my hot chocolate. Noah grinned at Gracie, who giggled mischievously. The afternoon melted into evening as they finished decorating. Eva disappeared into the kitchen, shooing everyone away when they tried to help. "It's Christmas Eve dinner," she insisted. "Let me do this for my family." The word family still made Tom's heart skip a beat. He gathered the kids to wrap the final presents, their whispered secrets and stifled giggles drifting from Gracie's bedroom. When Eva finally called them to dinner, the small dining room table was transformed. She'd found her grandmother's old tablecloth, ivory lace, now carefully mended. Candles flickered in mason jars, wrapped with ribbon. The turkey, golden and fragrant, sat amid dishes of mashed potatoes, green beans, with almonds, and warm rolls. "This is beautiful," Tom said softly, pulling out Eva's chair for her. They joined hands around the table, and Tom's voice wavered slightly as he said, "Grace, thank you, Lord, for bringing us together, for second chances and new beginnings, for the gift of family. Amen. Amen," they echoed, and Noah's eyes shone with unshed tears of joy. After dinner, they gathered around the tree. The children could barely contain their excitement as they handed out carefully wrapped packages. "Open mine first." Gracie thrust a lumpy package at Eva. Inside was a handmade photo frame, decorated with seashells they'd collected during their first beach trip together. The photo showed all four of them, windblown and laughing. "Oh, sweetheart," Eva pressed it to her heart. "It's perfect." Noah gave Tom a hand-drawn comic book titled My Dad the Hero, featuring stories of Tom's garbage route adventures and how he'd saved Eva that cold morning nearly a year ago. Tom had to wipe his eyes several times as he read it. The children's main presents would wait until morning, but they each got to open one. Small gift. Gracie squealed over new art supplies, and Noah hugged his new science kit clothes. As the evening grew late, the children sprawled on the carpet, watching the twinkling tree lights. Noah's head drooped against Gracie's shoulder, their matching Christmas pajamas making them look more like siblings than ever. Tom touched Eva's arm gently. "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his pocket, wrapped in simple silver paper. Eva's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a delicate silver ring set with a small pearl. "It's not," Tom started, then took a breath. "It's not an engagement ring. Not yet, but it's a promise. A promise that I'm here, that I'm not going anywhere, that whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Eva's eyes filled with tears as he slipped it onto her right hand. "It's beautiful, Tom." She touched the pearl gently. "Like the moon the night you saved me, the night we found each other again." They sat together on the couch, watching their sleeping children bathed in the soft glow of Christmas lights. Tom's arm wrapped around Eva's shoulders, and she leaned into him, their hearts beating in quiet synchronization. In the peaceful silence, Tom closed his eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. For the woman beside him who had never stopped believing in him, for the son he'd thought lost forever, for the daughter who had saved his life in so many ways, for second chances and Christmas miracles and the healing power of love. The snow continued to fall outside, wrapping their little house in a blanket of white, while inside, the warmth of family and forgiveness filled every corner of their home. The March morning sparkled with fresh possibility as sunshine poured through the kitchen windows. Tom stood at the counter, packing lunchboxes with the careful attention he gave to every task. He tucked a note into Noah's sandwich bag, a habit he'd started months ago that made the boy smile every day at lunch. "Dad," Gracie called from upstairs, "have you seen my science project folder?" "Check the living room coffee table," Tom replied, his voice carrying warmth even in its morning gruffness. He smiled to himself, still amazed at how naturally their morning routine had fallen into place. Eva breezed into the kitchen, already dressed in her business attire. Her presence filled the room with energy as she poured coffee into 2 travel mugs. "Big meeting with the county board today," she said, brushing a kiss against Tom's cheek. "We're finally presenting the foster care reform proposal." Tom caught her hand and squeezed it. "They'd be crazy not to listen to you. You've put your heart and soul into this." "Found it," Gracie announced triumphantly, bounding down the stairs with her folder. Noah followed more quietly behind her, but his eyes held a contentment that grew stronger each day. The kitchen bustled with activity as they all gathered around the small table for breakfast. Tom watched. His family, the word still made his heart skip as they shared toast and cereal. Eva reviewed notes for her presentation while Gracie chatted about her upcoming science fair. Noah sketched in his notebook between bites, something he did less from anxiety now and more from genuine creative desire. "You're going to knock 'em dead at that science fair?" Tom told Gracie, ruffling her hair as he cleared the plates. "Just like you did with your veterans group yesterday," Eva added, smiling at Tom. "How many showed up for the mentorship program?" 15, Tom replied, pride evident in his voice. Martinez helped spread the word. Even got some local businesses interested in hiring opportunities. The promotion to supervisor at the sanitation department had given Tom more flexible hours, allowing him to expand the weekend support group he'd started. What began as informal meetings now included job training and peer counseling. He thought about the men and women who came each week, carrying burdens similar to those he'd once shouldered alone. "Time to head out, troops," Eva announced, gathering her briefcase. The kids scrambled for their backpacks, and Tom helped Noah adjust his straps. They stepped out into the crisp spring morning. The street was coming alive with neighbors heading to work and school buses making their rounds. "Mrs." Lavelle waved from her porch, where spring flowers were already pushing through the soil. "Good morning, Mrs. L," Gracie called out. The elderly woman had become like a grandmother to both children, spoiling them with cookies and stories in equal measure. The walk to school was one of Tom's favorite parts of the day. Gracie skipped ahead, pointing out new blooms in neighbors' gardens. Noah walked beside her, offering quiet observations about the changing season that showed how much he'd opened up over the months. Eva's hand found Tom's as they followed behind the children. Her fingers intertwined with his felt like home, a feeling he'd once thought was forever beyond his reach. "Remember when you first volunteered at the school?" Tom asked softly. "Gracie calling you Miss Sunshine?" Eva laughed. "She still does sometimes, when she's trying to convince me to let her stay up late." They watched as their children navigated the morning crowd at the school entrance. Gracie adjusted Noah's collar with sisterly authority while he pretended to be annoyed but couldn't hide his smile. "Have a great day," Eva called out. "Noah, good luck on your art presentation." The boy turned back, his face bright with confidence that would have been unimaginable months ago. "Thanks, Mom." The words still brought tears to Eva's eyes sometimes. As the kids disappeared into the building, Tom and Eva turned toward home. The morning sun painted everything in shades of promise. Tom thought about his journey, from soldier to addict to garbage collector to father and mentor. Each step, even the painful ones, had led him here. Eva squeezed his hand. "Penny for your thoughts?" Tom looked at their joined hands, then at the woman who had given him a second chance at love and family. "I thought I'd spend my life cleaning up after the world," he said thoughtfully. "But turns out I was just making space for something beautiful." What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Tom Rourke, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.